Howdy, howdy, and welcome back to another strategy session. This is Workshop Wednesday, and we're going to be talking today about the future of measurement, the tools that you'll use in 2022 and beyond. Before we get too far into this, welcome. If this is your first Workshop Wednesday, my name is Chris Mercer. Everybody calls me Mercer. You should as well. I am the co-founder of MeasurementMarketing.io, and whether you found us through some of our podcasts and talks that we give, we share some of our content with other platforms like CXL Institute, Digital Marketer, Social Media Examiner, Measure Summit. Maybe you are already a member, whether a free Toolbox member or a member of the Measurement Marketing Academy. However you found us, we are happy that you're here. It's our job to help people like you learn how to use all of these crazy cool tools like Google Analytics and Tag Manager and Data Studio. And there's a lot of tools out there. There's a lot to keep straight. So we're going to talk today about a strategy just to make sure that you can kind of, especially as you're thinking about planning for the new year, 2022, just to make sure that we've got a good direction as to what tools you are currently using, how you're using those tools, and maybe what tools you might want to look toward using in the future to help you get through 2022. Of course, our flagship training program is the Measurement Marketing Academy. It's an incredible platform, if I do say so myself, but we will talk more about that at the end of this training. For now, just focus on one new thing, one new idea, one new, maybe even tool that you're like, wow, I didn't even realize we might want to start looking at that for 2022. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Strategy session, the future of measurement and the tools you'll use in 2022 and beyond. All right, we're going to go ahead and start as we normally do with the framework. Now, remember the framework is 3 steps. You plan out your measurement, you then build out your measurement, and then, of course, you launch the measurement, meaning that you use the thing so you can actually get answers. Now, most marketers are marketing in the blind. Our problem is that we don't know what else to do. We're setting up these systems, we're using tools like Google Analytics, etc., but we're just not getting any real insights from them in most cases. What we're trying to do is set up our measurement so that it naturally produces this result, that we are marketing or using our marketing systems, our measurement systems, so that eventually and fairly quickly, our marketing starts producing reliable profit and revenue. Just the fact that we're using the system does that. Now, how does it do this? First, we plan, and you start with the questions you're going to ask, and then you think about all the information you need to collect in order to get those answers. And then you think about what actions you're going to take based upon the answers that you get. Those 3 steps are incredibly important, and without those, you do not have a measurement plan. You must start there first. Now, in today's training, we're going to focus on some tools that can help with that. In the build, once you have all of that, the results, right? What results are you trying to measure for? You got to make sure your platforms understand that. You got to make sure that your platform understands where the traffic is coming from. So the platform in this case might be something simple like Google Analytics, or at least shouldn't say simple, but it is something free like Google Analytics. And once you've got your traffic and your results tied together so that it's telling a story, which is, again, not hard, as you have to go through a certain series of steps to use these tools. But once you know how to use the tool to do that, you have a fairly simple story to read. And it really can be simple. I use that word purposely there. So once you have your story of how traffic is causing results, then you can start to actually use the measurement platform to improve things. So that is, we start to listen to the conversation that's happening between the users and the website. Once we understand the general idea of how that conversation is flowing, we can start to forecast how that conversation will continue. We can start to forecast based on our recent past what the near future is going to look like in terms of our numbers. And then we measure against our forecast because we're asking ourselves, like, is this thing working like it's supposed to? And you measure against them. That is how you know what specific step or part of your funnels or customer journeys or user journeys to actually optimize, where to put your effort and your resources to move the needle. That's where the insights come in. So that's the optimization process. And that whole thing is the measurement marketing framework. So this is what we teach in the academy. And the reason that we went through it a little bit slower on this particular training is because as a strategist, when you're working and you're trying to make sure that your teams, your organization, or yourself, if you're trying to figure out your own measurement strategies for 2022, it's important to make sure that you have a framework. So number one, this is the most absolutely by far the number one thing is you've got to make sure you have a framework. So obviously we suggest using this one. Use whatever framework you want, but use a framework for your first tool. Now, the second thing, and this is very, very important, regardless of the framework, you use the measurement marketing framework, you come up with your own, whatever it is, you will go through stages. So it's not like you're going to go through the framework once and then everything's done. You go through stages. So you see in this picture, we have the cave. The cave is where everybody starts. You don't have a whole lot of visibility in a cave. Your job is to sort of just get used to the tools, turn them on, get some very basic information in your reports, and then get enough to get out of the cave. So you can take a look and see kind of a little bit more visibility. It's what we call the valley, which is the middle part there. So in the valley, notice that they went from walking in the cave to riding a bike in the valley. That's a very important symbol that we've put in there on purpose because your implementation will change. As you learn how to use the tools, as you add new tools, your measurement systems, your measurement implementation is changing. It's adjusting. And that's the first thing I wanted to, or second thing I should say besides the framework, to really focus in when you're talking about 2022 is understanding where you are as an organization. And you might still be in the cave if you don't have a whole lot of insights, if you're not able to take action, if your measurement isn't telling you a story, you might still be in the cave. And your job is to get out of the cave. So start learning how to use these tools so that you can get some basic visibility, get into the valley visibility. Is it a little more complicated setup? Maybe, but maybe that's just because you're now using the tool for all it can do and you didn't realize it could do certain things, right? So that's kind of what the valley is. Eventually, if you look in the upper right-hand corner, you see the summit. Now, what's the summit? The summit is obviously going from mountaintop to mountaintop to mountaintop, but what are they using? You can't use a bike, but a helicopter's there. And what a lot of people do is they will be at a mastermind, they'll take a training, they'll Google something, and they start to see these measurement suggestions. People are saying, oh, you need to take these 12 metrics if you're at a e-commerce store or something like that. And these are very complicated metrics sometimes to get, right, based upon the system. So they're looking at these summit-style setups and these people that are saying, oh, you should know this metric or that metric or do this or do that. Well, that's a very complicated measurement system sometimes that they're using to do that. And it's easy for them because they've got measurement muscle, but maybe not for you. Maybe if you're in the cave, you don't want to build a helicopter because a helicopter is not useful in the cave. So the whole point of this particular section here is just to allow yourself to be where you are, to acknowledge where you are. If you're in the cave, there is no problem with that. Everybody starts in the cave. We did too. But your job is to realize you're in the cave. Don't build a helicopter. Don't try to do something overly complicated. And how do you know if you're doing this? How do you know if you're building a helicopter in the cave? It's when you've worked on your measurement system over and over and over, or you're having somebody do it, or somebody in your team's doing it, and you just don't feel like you're making progress. It's a lot of complicated stuff. People keep adding tools, and reports keep showing up, but you still don't know how to use them or what they're trying to tell you, and it's still not giving you any sort of useful truth that you can go take any sort of action on. And if that's happening where you're like busy, but there's no real results that you can get from your measurement, that's how you know you're building a helicopter in the cave, which again, a lot of companies do. So don't feel bad if that's where you're at because it is kind of what happens most of the time without proper training and guidance. And of course, that's what we're here for you today for. So just remember these three stages. So first, the framework, go through the framework. And second is you go through the framework over and over and over and over again. We have gone through our own framework thousands of times at this point, and we will continue to do it thousands of times more because every time you use it, you build a little bit more muscle, you get a little bit better, you get insights from it. And of course, now we're able to do more summit style setups on our own here at measurementmarketing.io because we have measurement muscle. But you don't have to do that. You don't have to do that. You start where you are. So if you're in the cave, awesome, stay in the cave. Most companies stay in the valley for a very, very long time. You can be in the valley for years and get so much done, grow a very, very strong organization, grow lots of revenue, lots of profit when you're in the valley. And then the summit is there if and when you need very complicated questions answered. Now, let's go ahead and dive into Lucidchart, talk a little bit more about how we think about this. So I've got a kind of a grid set up, and there's really three main things we're going to cover here in this little matrix that we've set up. So the first is from any measurement system, you're going to need it to be able to collect the different behaviors that are happening, that the users are giving on the user journey, all these different signals they give. Things like, did they purchase? What page did they see? Did they scroll? Did they click on a button? All that sort of stuff is in the collect phase. So you collect the information. Then your measurement system must store that information. And then when it's stored in its database, it has to be able to get the information to you. That's what reports are for. And this is where, as users, we are interacting with our measurement platform is in the reporting stage, right? We see all of that. But first, in order for a report to be there, something like the source medium report in Google Analytics, you have to have collected the information, stored the information before a report can be built about that information. So that's collect, store, and report, this little CSR model of measurement that we talk about. Now, how do you do that when you're in the cave? And then we're going to talk about this very quickly in these different tools that you will want to maybe keep an eye out for depending upon where you are. So I'm going to flip over to grab a little logo here. Google Analytics, by and large, it's a little bigger than I thought, so we're going to shrink that one down. So Google Analytics is a great tool because it will actually allow you to, let's go ahead and shrink this down. There we go. So, oops, that did not work at all. Sorry about that. Didn't realize we grabbed the title there too. So Google Analytics will do on its own, it'll do collection. It'll collect stuff as you go through. It will actually store stuff as well. So it'll collect and it'll store as you go through. So this platform is built to do that. It's kind of the cool thing about Google Analytics. There we go. Just kind of get a nice little manageable size here. So Google Analytics will actually go through and set that stuff up. It'll collect information, and meaning like page views. It does that stuff automatically. So when you're in the cave, you just have to turn it on, and then it'll automatically do that, right? So I'm just going to pop this over here. So we have a little Google Analytics guy. And then Google Analytics also, as we talked about earlier, will build its own reports. It has a source medium report. It's got landing page reports, especially in Universal Analytics. So you have this ability for Google Analytics to be used across the board. It's a free tool. I absolutely suggest you use it. I definitely have talked to companies, still talk to companies, who aren't using any sort of analytics platform at all. So if you are in the cave where you're just trying to figure this stuff out and you're like, I'm not really sure where to start with any sort of measurement, just use Google Analytics. Now, of course, and please keep this in mind, I'm going to be biased when it comes to this. I think most people do not know how to use Google Analytics. And so we, of course, have training in the academy for that, for the members. But the idea is that you're using Google Analytics for a specific purpose, to collect the information, right? To be aware of that you're collecting information, you're storing information, you're then reporting on information. Just enough to light it up. Now, the whole point is so you can get these source medium reports. That does not, or the reports in Google Analytics, source medium being one of the most popular ones back there. It does not mean that Google Analytics is going to tell you a very easy to read story just because you turned it on. Because remember, in Google Analytics, you have to both activate it and you have to customize it so it knows how to tell you a story. There's a certain process you have to go through, which of course we don't have time for here, but you have to set it up. There's things like cross-domain, there's things like which events are you going to collect, there's things like, this is why the planning step is so important, to think about the questions to answer, etc. So, these are the different stages that you would go through. So first you have to sort of plan it out, you get analytics turned on, and you start figuring out how to not just activate the thing, meaning not just put code on a page or turn on the integration, but how to actually customize it. Because when it is activated and customized, now it is set up, and only at that point should you actually start to use it, because then now it's more likely to tell you a story. So if your Google Analytics is not telling you a natural story back there, if it's not easy for you to see that, that's probably where I would focus first, is that, because you probably just need to learn how to use the tool a little bit more, focus your time, effort, and energy there, and then you can build up from there. Now, again, analytics, I think, is a super easy one to start with in the cave. What will eventually happen is, as you go through this planning process that we talked about, with asking the right questions, collecting the information, thinking about the actions you're going to take based upon the answers, as you do that, you will have more complicated questions that you're going to focus on. You're going to want to get answers to. So it won't be just hey, which pages are they visiting first, but it might be which button are they clicking on, right? You might see something like that. So in these cases, when that's happening, how do you get a more advanced collection? Because Google Analytics is going to kind of tap out at a certain point. It's not really built to collect fine, minute details. It's not particularly easy to collect things like which button they clicked on, or how long they or how far down the page did they scroll, how much time did they spend on the page. Things like this are a little tougher, and that's where Tag Manager comes in. So I'm going to go ahead and bring over our little Tag Manager logo here. So at a certain point, you're going to want to start using Google Tag Manager. Now, Tag Manager, the whole purpose of Tag Manager is to collect behaviors. That's what it does incredibly well. That's the entire point. So its job is to sit there and to essentially be a witness to the behaviors that are happening on the page from your users. And then at a certain point, you start to train it. You sort of say, hey, when they show up on this particular page, maybe it's like a thank you page. So when they show up on the thank you page, please tell a thank you page of like a opt-in form, let's say, please tell Facebook that they just opted in, right? So now you can start bringing in other platforms, your measurement system, starting to make sure that the other platforms also know what's going on. And so Google Ads knows there's a purchase or an opt-in. Facebook knows there's a purchase or an opt-in. Google Analytics knows that there's some sort of purchase or opt-in. And what happens is, and this is kind of why I'm doing it like this, when you start collecting information, the information that you're collecting at the valley stage is coming through Tag Manager. Analytics no longer collects information on its own, but Analytics does store that information. So what you do is you have Tag Manager that then starts to actually get the information sent over into Google Analytics, because Google Analytics is incredible when it comes to storing information. It's a behavioral database. That's what it's there for. It's what it's designed to do. And then you can, of course, still use the Google Analytics reports if you wanted to, right? You can do that at a certain point, especially if your analytics is truly set up. And remember, setup means not just activating the thing, but you activate it and you've customized it because you understand how to use and set up the tool. And that's what a setup is. Setup means activated and customized for your own particular use. And now it'll tell you a story. So you have kind of this initial setup, but eventually, and this is what I would suggest again for 2022, if you're not using these tools, you certainly should, is not just Tag Manager, but Google Data Studio. And the reason that I suggest Data Studio, if you're not using Data Studio yet, again, all of these so far are free tools that we're talking about. So Data Studio is absolutely incredible. So I'm going to go ahead and bring this one over here. There's our little logo. So Data Studio, and I'm just going to crop this out to keep it nice and easy. So, oops, let's go back. So Data Studio is one of those tools, again, it's completely free, but it's built to do one thing and one thing really, really well. So in this case, that one thing is essentially reports, right? That's what it's built to do. It is built to report, to actually visualize data. That's it. That's all it does. It doesn't collect information, so it can't be in this collection thing. It doesn't actually store the information. In fact, you actually connect it to what they call data sources. So your data source would be Google Analytics. And so it's really in this report column. So now you've got a tool that is there to actually report, right? That's what it does. That's its job, is to go through and actually report stuff. So, and specifically visualize, right? And the reason that you use Data Studio versus Analytics, it doesn't mean that you never use Google Analytics again for reports. It's just that you start to flip-flop the priorities. So what you would first start doing is a Data Studio report, because Data Studio reports are easy, much, much easier to actually go through and to read. Why? Because they're built to be user-friendly. They're built to be focused data. Instead of Google Analytics, have you ever done this? You go to Google Analytics and you see a report and you're like, okay, I kind of get it, but I'm not sure what this other metric means. And you weren't even asking questions about like bounce rate, but all of a sudden you see it. So now you think, gosh, maybe I should do something there. And you start going down this wild, goose chase. You're trying to go through this thing. You see another report that sort of contradicts the first report. Now you don't even know what's going on. You're like, I'm just going to shut this thing down and I'll come back in a couple of years. This happens a lot in Google Analytics because the reports aren't made to answer specific questions. They're made to sort of give you general information about stuff, but it's a lot of information. Data Studio, you can create your dashboards and build them so they answer very specific reports, right? Very, very specific reports. Or questions you should have, I should say. And so maybe it's a funnel, a customer journey, and you can see all the different conversion steps. Then if you're trying to figure out why a certain step isn't working the way you need it to be, maybe at that point you go into Google Analytics and you can do more of a deep dive. So you start using Google Analytics more for analysis and answering like why things aren't happening versus Data Studio, which is kind of here's what's happening, and Analytics becomes a why, like why is this happening type of thing. So this is where it kind of goes. Now in the Valley, and this is specifically for 2022, because you definitely want to start focusing on this. Let's see if they have a little logo for this. We're going to say GA4. So we're going to look for. So there is a new kid on the block when it comes to Google Analytics. That was definitely not it. I guess there's a GA4 car. Let's see, Google Analytics 4, otherwise known as Google Analytics 4, GA4. Nope, still not being what we want, but that's okay. So I'm just going to type in, we're going to do a little text block here. We're going to type in GA4. Kind of boring, but you're going to get the idea. Google Analytics 4 is a completely new Google Analytics. And this is where I really wish Google would stop saying it's an upgrade. It's not exactly wrong. They aren't, to be fair. They're not exactly wrong that it is an upgrade to Universal, but it's not an upgrade like they've done upgrades before. And that's the miscommunication, I think, with a lot of most customers at this point. Boy, my mouse is just not helping me out here. There we go. Let's try to do this. We're going to pull this back down. There we go. Okay. So you will use what they call Universal Analytics. So that's still there. This is the regular analytics you're probably still using. Hopefully you are. And then you're going to be also using Google Analytics 4. It is not either or. It will be yes and it will probably be yes and through most of 2022 at this point. We were really, really hoping that Google Analytics 4 would be a platform that would be ready to basically take over in 2022. It's just not there yet. It's just not there yet. And you really need to use both because Universal Analytics has a lot of features, things like views. It's much easier to filter the data to get it in the way you want it to look like in Universal Analytics than it is in GA4. GA4 will eventually get there, but it's just not a production platform. Not as of this recording. We're recording this in December 2021. It's not ready yet. By the end of 2022, boy, I'm really absolutely hoping. I'm hoping it's happening earlier than 2022. But the whole point of this is that if you're not using GA4, please start. Please start. It will take you 6 months to learn how to use this platform. It is that different. It is not like it was back in the day. If you've been around analytics for a while, Google Analytics did a classic analytics and they upgraded to Universal Analytics, and that was fairly simple. It was like, it's just like Google Analytics, but better. And that was true. It was just like the reports were the same, the platform was the same, everything was in the same spot. It was just better version of itself. Google Analytics 4 is a completely different analytics platform. Completely different. The only thing it has in common with Universal Analytics is that it shares the name Google Analytics. That's really it. So even in Tag Manager, completely different tags for Google Analytics 4 than for Universal Analytics. You can't even use the same tags. It is a completely different platform. You need to start thinking about it like it's a completely different platform because it has completely different reports. It has completely different options for reports. They're better in a lot of cases, but they are, and I'm going to use this word on purpose, they are complicated. They are not the easiest thing in the world to get through. So you're going to need practice because you have to rethink, literally, you have to rethink data in a way, how you're going to organize your data and how you're going to put it into GA4, because how you do that is very different from Universal Analytics. It will take months for you and your teams to get used to this. So please, if you have not yet, get started on GA4. Not that you're going to use it for your production platform yet, but you will. Because why? You're going to have to. Universal Analytics is going away one day. Probably, my guess, 2023 is what I'm guessing. The reason I'm guessing that is because that's when Google is deprecating third-party cookies with Chrome. So it just sort of makes sense that if they're going to be making this big giant measurement change with Chrome and the tech there, that eventually they announce Universal Analytics is being deprecated. They've already said they're not upgrading Google Analytics anymore. Excuse me, Universal Analytics, I should say. They are definitely constantly putting out new things for GA4, but they're not really putting their effort into Universal Analytics, right? For them, it's kind of like a platform that's eventually going away in a couple of years. So why invest time, effort, and energy? Everything is going into Google Analytics 4. And this is good for us as measurement marketers because Google Analytics 4 is the platform of tomorrow. Again, not necessarily the platform of today. It's getting closer. It's so much better. It's 100% better than it was last year, but it's still about 80% of the way of what Universal can do. So Google Analytics 4 absolutely need to get in there and start practicing it, start using it. It's 100% more useful than it was a year ago for sure. So definitely start practicing it. But remember, Universal Analytics is what you're going to be using for now. And for most of 2022, that's probably going to be the case as we go through. But you've got to use both, right? Do not let your teams not be in GA4. You can definitely use Universal. We're going to be still using Universal. I was hoping to get a little ahead of the curve, but not quite yet. So Universal's still going to be the production platform, but GA4, we still have our GA4 account. We're still practicing GA4. We're still adjusting GA4 and playing around with it to make sure it's going to give us a useful truth so we can answer the questions we want to have. And that makes us ahead of the game when it comes to the competition because maybe some of our competitors aren't. Like in our case, they probably are because we all teach measurement. But if I was a regular, like a shoe store or something, I guarantee you the other competitors aren't. They're not even thinking about GA4 and they're going to get squashed when that deprecation announcement comes out, and they all try to race into Google Analytics 4 thinking it's just like Universal Analytics, but better. But it is better, just not at all like Universal Analytics. You have to learn this platform. So please make sure that GA4 is on your list for 2022 if you have not yet already done that. Now, the other tools that I think are worth mentioning for how you think about stuff and what's going to be going on for 2022, I'm just going to pull up, we're going to do a little server here is what I'm going to do. So the reason I'm going to say server is because there is a new version, new-ish version. It's been around for a little while, but this idea of, let's do a little icon instead. The idea of server-side, being a server in the cloud, running an actual measurement server in the cloud. So we'll bring this one over. I think this is a good little icon for that. So server-side, the way that this works is you have a tag manager container that is stored on a server in the cloud, right? Typically a Google server, but you could also do it with AWS if you wanted or anything like that. But the reason that you would then do this, the reason this information is collected, and you kind of do both. So I'm gonna also copy our tag manager here because it is still tag manager. It's just a different version. It's called server side GTM. But you would basically, it's a yes and. You don't stop using the web version of Tag Manager. Use both. But you've got the web version that's collecting different behaviors that are happening on the page. And some of those are being sent into, or most of those should be being sent into your measurement server. The measurement server, then at that point, it is what they call first party data. Now, remember, server side Tag Manager is paid. You have to buy the server. You have to basically rent your space, right? So you have to, the container itself is free to use. Tag Manager is free to use, but the server is what costs. So you get the server roughly $100 a month figure to do this on average if you're a small business. So maybe a little less. But ballpark it about $100. It's not a tiny investment. It's not like it's $5 a month. It's going to be at least around $100. Ballpark it. But you've got now the web version of Tag Manager sending signals to your measurement server. So it's not going directly to Google Analytics yet. It's going directly to your measurement server. And then what's nice about this is you can start to transform your data. And that's the big difference between a Valley style setup and a Summit style setup. Is the Summit style, you start to send all the data to kind of a central source. And instead of, in this case with the Valley, we sort of send it to Google Analytics, and Google Analytics does all the processing and puts it in the right spot. The server here, in this case, starts doing that, where it starts collecting things and changing data around. And again, it's all first party because it'll be on your domain, right? It's a server that's under your domain. So it's first party data, very, very important for 2022. So as you have your first party data, you start transforming that data, and maybe you send a Google Analytics 4 hit, but that same data that you send with the Google Analytics 4 hit will go and transform itself and also be sent over to Facebook and Google Ads and whatever else can use it. So that's kind of the idea. First party data. You have a lot more control over the data at this point. It is a lot more complicated than regular Tag Manager. Pretty simple to set up, but it opens you up to a whole new world. So you need technical resources on your team to be able to take advantage of server side. So just sort of keep that in mind too. So this was something that you don't have to do. Server side is not a have to. It's just okay. At a certain point, you might, right? And most larger companies probably will. I think eventually this will become more and more accessible as a tool. Again, it's kind of new-ish. But as it gets more templates built for it, which is certainly going to happen in 2022, the platform server side will become easier to implement. So right now it's kind of in the Summit style. Possibly as 2022 goes on, it gets a little easier to use, and I might even drop it down to a Valley setup and be like, oh, maybe for Valley people, because it is so much easier to get started with and there's templates and everything else, we can start using it. It's not quite there yet. I would say only if you've got real measurement muscle do you start using something like server side. Don't start with that at all. But it is something to look toward and say, okay, maybe eventually we will want to do this as you go through. Now, talking about how we're going to actually go through and store everything. Again, we're talking about this concept of Summit style setups, right? Very complicated Summit style setups is BigQuery. There's a database, right? BigQuery database. So BigQuery, let's pull this little logo over here. BigQuery essentially does the job of what something like Google Analytics will do, right? So BigQuery can do that. Oh, that didn't work at all. Let's try another one here. So what BigQuery does, it's a database essentially that you can use to actually, you send all information to a database. BigQuery helps you to get through that and quote unquote query the database so that you can go through, instead of looking to Google Analytics and looking at the reports out of Google Analytics. BigQuery doesn't have reports. BigQuery just stores, right? That's what it does. It just stores information. So what the whole concept is, let me see if I can get this to shrink down a little bit. There we go. Okay, so with BigQuery, now that we've got that shrunk down, so the concept of BigQuery is that it'll actually go through and it will store the information that you need to be stored. Now, what's the information? The behaviors that Tag Manager is collecting. And so what else is it storing? It's not just storing Tag Manager stuff. Maybe you're pushing stuff from Facebook into BigQuery. Maybe you're like ad spend. Maybe you're now again transforming the data, right? It's kind of an additional step between collecting and storing here, is you're transforming the data technically between store and report is where that would happen. But you would have this idea that BigQuery is now storing everything. You're associating with a user record. Again, emphasis on not easy, right? Not simple, very complicated, lots of moving parts and pieces when it comes to BigQuery, because you have to really think about your data structure and everything else that's going on. My mouse is not cooperating today. I'm grabbing these different images and it's not quite paying attention. So I'm just going to shrink this down a little bit more. All right, there we go. So So the idea with BigQuery again is that you're going to be sitting there and you're going to be thinking through your data schema, how it's going to be organized. It's highly complicated because you have to coordinate the data. You really have to spend time on planning. So if your organization is not good at planning stuff out, not thinking through what the data is going to look like, how you're going to connect the dots between Facebook and Google Ads and Google Analytics and whatever other platforms you're using, this is something you probably want to avoid right now. Get really good at that stuff. Get really good at that stuff. And then you can come back and make it better later, right? As you go into a summit style setup. So remember, BigQuery, absolutely not when you're in the cave. Just use analytics. But the Valley setup, not needed for BigQuery. Easy to connect actually with GA4 because they know BigQuery is going to be a tool in the future for measurement. They just know this. So they've made it a free thing where GA4 will pipe its data into BigQuery for you. But then you have to learn BigQuery to be able to pull that information out. Or at the very least, this is kind of where our friend Data Studio comes back in. At the very least, you can connect Data Studio and use BigQuery as your data source, and it's instead of Google Analytics. Now, why would you do that? Because BigQuery, in a perfect world, right? Again, it takes time, effort, and energy, especially with a summit style setup. But then BigQuery would have everything about the users, the behaviors, and all the stuff they're doing through the site, so that you can go to Google Data Studio and say, hey, can you go to BigQuery and ask it, how many users that saw this page also saw this page, and it would kind of have that information. That's the idea. So again, not the easiest thing in the world to set up. Summit styles are very complicated. They cost money. They require teams in most cases. Summit style, very complicated. The reason I keep emphasizing this is because most companies want to start with the summit style because they feel that's what they should have because it's a thing. Like, why not? Why not go to the mountaintop? But you probably shouldn't climb a mountaintop if you don't even know how to hike yet. And if you shouldn't be hiking if you don't even know how to walk yet. And you shouldn't be walking if you don't know how to crawl. And so that's what's very important with measurement is the cave isn't crawling, right? Crawling is just when you're not measuring anything at all. Walking is in the cave where you're like, okay, I'm going to start using Google Analytics. I'm going to start understanding Google Analytics as a platform, how it works, the tools I might be using. And then it's okay, Valley setup for 2022. What are we going to be using? Let's start making sure tag managers that we're absolutely experts at Tag Manager by the end of 2022, that we are experts at Google Analytics 4 by 2022, and definitely with Data Studio. And then the Valley, you might stay in it for 2023 and 2024. You could do this for years, stay in the Valley with these simple tools and still be fine. But eventually, you will end up getting your own measurement server, probably. I think big combination of your company growing and just needing it, or the fact that Tag Managers the server-side Tag Manager becomes a little easier to be accessible, right? Other third-party services will come out that make it easier to use, et cetera, et cetera. And so eventually you will have a measurement server because you will need it long-term because as the data privacy and everything else starts happening, everything's going to have to be first-party data. There won't be third-party data. So you'll have to own the data, right? Be in control of that data. And that's what first-party data is. And the server is the only way to really do that. Otherwise, it's stored on Google servers, which makes it their data, not yours, right? So you want to make sure that you are having your own server eventually. Same thing with BigQuery. Eventually, you start getting used to BigQuery. Does it mean you have to start using it now? No. Between Google Analytics 4 and BigQuery, which one should you focus on? Google Analytics 4, hands down. Between Google Analytics 4 and Tag Manager, which one should you focus on? Tag Manager, hands down. So do this in this order. Get really good at Google Analytics, the universal analytics that's already back there, because all those lessons that you learn with universal analytics, not so much the tactics, but the strategies and how you're using the platform as an analytics platform now, all those things that you learn will help you when it's time for GA4, right? So they transfer over. But Tag Manager would be the next thing. Once you use Universal, learn Tag Manager. Once you've got Tag Manager, go to the Data Studio basics and really understand that. Then you can come into GA4. And then at that point, you move into maybe server-side Tag Manager or BigQuery if and when you need to. But don't worry about learning it just for the sake of learning it. Learn it as you need it. Learn it when you need it. I'm a big proponent of that as you come through. All right. So with that, we will go ahead and wrap up. We talked about a lot of the tools that I think you're going to be using in 2022. There's one other one that I wanted to emphasize as just kind of like a honorary mention because I think they've done a really good job with this. And that is, I can't go to it. I was going to do it for a second. So Microsoft Clarity is one of those tools because you need visual as well, not just the hard numbers, but Microsoft Clarity. So I won't bring over the logo because it really doesn't fit here, but you could technically do it in the cave. It's just a script that goes on your page and it shows you things like rage clicks and dead clicks, right? People were clicking on a certain area where nothing actually happened. So maybe that's a indicative of it looks like a button. A rage click would be like they keep clicking on it over and over again, expecting something to happen, but it's not. And it records this stuff. It records heat maps, scroll maps. It records screen recordings, and it's free from Microsoft. So Microsoft Clarity, I think they've done an incredible platform. I actually met one of the developers of that not too long ago at a conference I was at, and I was giving them kudos. Like, they've done a really good job. It's a free tool. You can use it in the cave. You can use it in the valley. You can use it in the summit. There's really no setup. It's just activation. You take the code and you put it on the page, and it's not that complicated because it just does visual stuff. It's not going to build a funnel for you or any of that sort of thing, the things you can do with Data Studio. But it will give you like heat maps and screen scroll maps, etc. And those screen recordings, very important. And it organizes things very, very nicely. So you don't have to spend hours going through 100 videos. It'll say, hey, these videos have rage clicks. Do you want to see just these videos? You're like, yes, I do. And then you can see if there's a pattern there that you need to address from a user behavior standpoint. So again, that's a free tool, Microsoft Clarity. If you haven't explored that, it's worth exploring for sure. All right. With that, we will officially wrap this one up. What's your one thing? Now, hopefully the 3 stages was one of those things. If you haven't thought about that, you got to remember where you are. Most people, when you're looking at the blog posts that people are putting out there and most of the videos, especially from larger organizations, they forget what it's like to be in the cave. I know we've been guilty of that for sure. That's why we kind of created this system, so we have it. But the summit, people think that they should always be at the summit just because there is a summit. That is not true. You probably don't need it unless you're a very, very large organization. But remember, the summit is a helicopter. So helicopters are very difficult to build, I would assume. And they are very difficult to fly. Again, I would assume, because I don't fly a helicopter. But they take coordination. They take experience, right? It takes a lot of resources to maintain a helicopter. So you have to think about that. If you want a summit-style setup, that's awesome. But you better be able to maintain a helicopter, build and maintain. The bike is a lot easier to maintain. So that's why the Valley works so much for so many people. And you can do so many things with a bike, right? There's electric bikes now. There's mountain bikes. There's all sorts of different style bikes, right? And then, of course, you've got the cave, which if that's where you're starting, that is awesome. Get really good at Google Analytics. Throw Microsoft Clarity on there. Understand the basics of measurement, get through the framework, right? That sort of stuff. And of course, as an Academy member, if you happen to be an Academy member, you can use Ask Instructor Support. We'll help you through the stages as we go through. Now, the framework hopefully was another one thing. Remember the whole plan, build, launch stage. We want to ask the right questions, informations, and actions. I talked about tools to help with that. I'm actually going to show you those in just a little bit here as well. They're in your toolbox. So in the membership toolbox, we have tools that will help you to do that. There's a whole measurement planning kit. There's a Google Analytics audit that's back there, so you can kind of figure out where to focus to make sure that you've customized properly. It's kind of like a checklist to make sure you've customized analytics. So there's lots of things back there. But remember, the framework isn't just a one and done. You go through it over and over and over and over and over. And each time you go through each of these 9 steps, or I should say 3 steps and the 9 keys that are total there, from questions all the way up through optimization. Each time you go through that in that order, very specific, very purposeful, you must go through it in this order, you build a little bit more measurement muscle every time you go through it. So each time you go through it, you're better than the previous time you went through it. So you get more from it, right? And again, we go through this exact framework for our stuff to this day. And we've done this for many, many years. So I would encourage you to do that. All right, next week's workshop is another strategy session. This happens to be a month where there are 5 Wednesdays, so we do 2 strategy sessions. And we figured, you know what, with the year end, it's going to be the last one for 2021. We're going to cover the top 10 goals to improve measurement strategy in 2022, just to give you some things to maybe shoot for as a strategist as you're working toward planning out for 2022. So if you want that workshop, just be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel, hit the notification bell icon, and of course, YouTube will send you a little email as it is available for you. The other way that you can get it is the Measurement Marketing Toolbox. Remember I said that there were tools that we were going to give you that help with the plan. The Toolbox is what has them all. So you get the most recent Workshop Wednesday back there, but you also get the toolkits. So like the Google Analytics Report Card, the Marketing Behavior Toolkit, GTM Cookbook if you're learning Tag Manager, Traffic Tracking Toolkit. There's a Dashboard Toolkit back there. There's like 40 tools. I'll show you those in a second. They are all free for you as a Toolbox member. Just go to measure.tips/WW. It's our way of giving back because we know not everybody can afford something like the Measurement Marketing Academy. So we help out where we can with these videos and of course with the tools back there. So measure.tips/WW, just a name and email. It'll create your free membership and then you'll have access to everything. Now, our paid program is the Measurement Marketing Academy. So if it is something that makes sense for you or your organization, I would absolutely ask that you consider the Academy because it is a just-in-time learning platform to make sure that you get through this We built the academy for the framework to help you get through the framework over and over and over again at the stage where you're at. So get through it in the valley, or get through it in the cave to the valley to the summit, and then over and over and over again to help you. When should you use BigQuery? Academy members can ask instructors and say, hey, here's my setup. Here's what's going on. Should I even use BigQuery right now or not? And the instructors will tell you, right? And they'll give you some advice. At best, they're give you some advice that can help you shortcut a lot of stuff. They can help your team with tactics, meaning the actual implementation of a certain goals not firing, that sort of stuff. Like, it's what it's back there for. So a quick tour of the academy I'll show you as we go through here. When you come into the academy, you basically have access to these 6 blocks. So you've got the content portion is really the win courses, the on-demand workshops, and the toolbox, which are the free tools I said that we have also for the toolbox members. But the academy members, you get all this stuff too. This is all unlocked. So you get the win courses, the on-demand workshops, and the toolboxes are content. Support, you have members helping members in the Winner Circle community. And then you have Ask an Instructor support, where you actually reach out to our instructors and they help you, which is, of course, what most people do. So I'll show you the content portion first. The win courses, they look like this when you come through. The reason we organize them by date is because we do update these courses. So we're either doing a new update or a entirely new course every 4 to 6 weeks on average is kind of what we've done with these. And we've done that for years. So you can see all the different courses organized by date. So you can see the analytics course. Google Analytics 4 was just redone in August. There's Google Analytics Basics that was just redone in November 2021. Tag Manager. We had server side that just came out in June. As well. So you've got the server side, latest on server side, et cetera, et cetera. You can see all of the courses that we have that are back here for you. Now, other ways to organize them by topic, obviously. Google Analytics. So you can see we go through the setup. Here's how to activate and customize so it's properly set up. Then here's how to use it. That's the basics. Then the beyond basics, do some cool tricks with it. Then you have how to set up e-commerce, how to do, and then of course, Google Analytics 4, right? Same thing with the basics of learning Google Analytics 4. So we're back here helping you to make sure that you're up to date on all these tools. Tag Manager, Win Tag Manager Basics, Beyond Basics, retargeting setup, server side, right? JavaScript as you get into it a little more. Dashboards and reporting. This is where data studios, things that come like that come in, right? So remember, at a Valley setup, you can get a lot done with just those 3 tools: Analytics, Data Studio, and Tag Manager. So you'll have all of this down, but there's also additional things like using Google Sheets or funnel tracking, which numbers are important, how to attribute traffic, how to think about this stuff is important. And that's why that thinking stuff is these courses around strategy, right? So the Measurement Marketing Framework, by the way, as an Academy member, when you first come in, this is the most important course. You must take this course. It puts everything in the context. It makes it easier for you to build a kind of a curriculum for yourself as you go through the academy and understand which courses are important and why, which tools to use and why. That's the framework. So make sure you go through that first. But then there's things like building your measurement plan, your optimization strategy, how to forecast, right? Using Search Console, Google Optimize for split testing. Shopify, we did one for Shopify because it's a pretty popular platform, regular expressions. There's a lot of stuff back here because strategy is the secret sauce. It's not about using the tool. It's about how to use the tool, how to think about the tool. That's important when it comes to this. And so we've got all these courses that are back here. And again, they are organized by lesson and topic. It's traditional courses that you are familiar with most other organizations. I'm sure you've been through them a million times. But that's what we've got as well. But it's all focused on measurement, all at different levels for where you need to be. Now, the next section, that was the win courses. The next section is on-demand workshops. So on-demand workshops, you've got the most recent workshop Wednesday that will be back here. But you also have these versions of basically these exact videos, but they are edited down for our students because Academy members don't want to have to watch a tour going through the Academy. That doesn't make sense. So we edit these down. We cut out tours like this. We put in zoom effects, right? They're a lot shorter to get through and searchable. So you can go through and look for goals and then find everything that matches goals. But they're also organized by topic as well. So we do the what's new, which is where every month we go through the latest and greatest updates. Here's the one we did in early December to go through what changed in November. There were some changes that came through in December. We'll cover those in early January of 2022. And you'll have records. So if you are out for a month or so, you want to come back and get caught up, this is a great way to do it, to see what the latest and greatest on those tools are so you can make sure your teams are up to date and they're using the most important features because sometimes they don't stay up to date on their own. Getting started is the beginner topics that can come through so you can kind of learn about different things and having your team go through the implementers of your team to learn about certain things like ABCs of how to use UTMs. Then you've got beyond basics, a little more advanced stuff, making sure like, hey, I didn't know there was a thing called the eyes in the journey. This might help you. Maybe you don't have to do this as an implementer because you're more on the strategy side, but you should definitely have an eyes on the journey if you don't know what that is. I'll show you that in a second. Then you've got strategy sessions. Strategy sessions, again, how to think about stuff. So how to work with your teams, the strategy behind it, planning stuff out, all of that sort of stuff. So that's what this is going through. So you'll have all of those in the members area itself. And remember, that is in the on-demand workshop. So just these two have thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars of value back here, because you look at some of the courses that are out there being sold right now just with Google Analytics. It's hundreds of bucks for a decent Google Analytics course. And the workshops are something where they're not quite big enough for a course, but they're very focused topics. It's also how we keep things up to date so much, because if something changes quickly in this world, which they do, sometimes tools radically change, we can do a workshop on it very quickly, get it out to the members, make sure everybody knows about it. And then we'll eventually redo the course as well, right? Coming through, because that's just how we operate. So make sure we stay things up to date. So that's the main part of the sort of learning content there. Again, on demand. So you can use it whenever you want. You can search through the database. It'll search and find you all the WIN courses that match that term, or all the workshops that match that term, kind of, DIY whenever you want, 24/7 on-demand access that you'll have. The other section is the toolbox. Now the toolbox, this is the part I said was free for toolbox members. It is. All of this stuff is free. Remember all these different tools? These are all ones that we have developed, that we've created for our members, and so everybody has access to these. But the Academy members, you have access to these, which is the Get It Done guides. So Eyes on the Journey kind of looks like this. That's what it looks like. But it measures what's happening on a specific page. So it's like a deep dive. It's like an X-ray of what's happening on the page, so you can really understand the conversation going on between the user and the website, or at least that particular page on the website or that particular step. It's an incredibly useful report. It is definitely been responsible for lots of revenue for us individually, and of course for our students. But it's a certain report that we help people understand. Once you know Tag Manager, you have to know Tag Manager, Analytics, and Data Studio. But once you know those tools, we start focusing on other reports, and we'll show you how to build them. And as we create new reports that help our company, we teach them to the students, right, to you, to our Academy members. So just make sure that you pay attention to that, especially if you are already an Academy member. Go through that, because that is incredibly useful. So there's our content, the WIN courses, the workshops, the toolbox, but you will need support. That's a big difference between watching a YouTube video and, a lot of times we can't support the YouTube videos. I appreciate a lot of the questions, which is awesome back there, and I love the comments, so thank you for all the kind comments on YouTube videos, but it's hard to be able to offer support on a lot of that stuff, because we are really focused on taking care of our members, and we have a lot of support questions that happen there because this stuff is complicated. I get it. So we like to help out where we can, but Winner Circle is the place to go when you have a community of people that are asking each other questions coming through, so broken down by different topics, right? Some specific platforms, sometimes because our instructors aren't Google Ads experts. We're not traffic experts. So if you have a Facebook ads question as it relates to measurement, we can help you. But if it relates to how to use Facebook ads to get some better result or something, that's probably better suited by another member who runs Facebook traffic. They can help you out. Maybe you have a secret superpower that you can use. Maybe you're really good at building funnels, or a certain platform using, some platform funnel builder that's out there. You can help other members too. And, again, everybody speaks measurement marketing back here. So it's a pretty cool support system, members helping members. But this one, the Ask Instructor support, this is a whole new level of support. This is not I lost my password kind of support. This is help me measure my stuff kind of support. So you can put in your question, put in the details of the question. Love screenshots and videos, so please send those. And what you do, imagine sort of doing a video like I'm doing for you now, where you can see my entire screen, you can see the URL, you can see everything, and you're sort of walking me through the setup. Here's my user journey. I'm not even sure what a goal should be. Where should I even start? We get questions like that all the time, a lot of strategy style questions. Our instructors will give you direction and guidance, and they will typically send videos back. So you really start to build a relationship. Many of our students just start referencing instructors by name because they really build a relationship with them. It's like having a consultant on call. Again, not real time. This is not a real time chat, but it's answers within hours. So typically within 24 business hours. Answers within hours, not days. That's the whole idea of this. So that is Ask an Instructor support. Again, the most popular feature we have back in the Academy for obvious reasons, because it's a little more private between your side and our side. So our teams can help you out. You can ask us strategy questions, implementation questions. It just doesn't matter. As long as it's measurement related, we are here to help and at least get you unstuck and on the way. That's our goal. Can't promise we're going to have an answer every single time, but man, most of the time we're able to definitely help you with getting unstuck and on the way. And that's the idea. It's just sometimes having a fresh pair of eyes from somebody who understands measurement, but more importantly, we understand marketing. So that is the Measurement Marketing Academy in a nutshell. So just to recap that, you've got the courses, the Ask Instructor support, the on-demand workshop library, the Winner Circle community. The courses themselves, you get access to everything. There's no restrictions. Any new updates, you get them. Any new courses we create, you get them automatically. So at least with the number of that are back there, we used to sell them for a couple $100 a piece. But now that's not done anymore. We don't do that anymore. So it's $4,000 value just with the courses. The Ask Instructor support, there were hundreds and hundreds of workshops that are back there. $5,000 value for those. True story. We used to, when we first started this company, we sold those for $20 a piece. That's how we started. And then we eventually built it to a membership site because it's just easier for everybody. So there's a $5,000 value just with all of those, that content back there. The on-demand workshop library, actually, I take that back. The Ask Instructor support is what I was just talking about. Ask Instructor support for the entire year. You have access to instructors, right, for as long as you want. The library, worth $5,000 with all the videos that are back there. And then Winner Circle community, having that members community for the entire year. You're able to have access to all of that, worth at least $1,000. People who get marketing, who get measurement, and who get other types of platforms, and you can all share your expertise and build networks. There's lots of cool communication that goes back there. Sometimes members are just asking members questions, and you see the subject lines, and it's just, hey, such and such, because everybody starts to know each other. It's such a cool group. It's like its own little mini version of a mastermind, a little light version of a mastermind back there. So overall, the Academy is giving you access to a total of true value of over $15,000 in training and support if you had to buy these components individually. Obviously, it's not $15,000 a year. It is substantially less, but I absolutely will encourage you to join the Measurement Marketing Academy. At least consider it. Just go to measure.tips/getacademy. You will see at that point what the current offers are. So again, measure.tips/getacademy, and we look forward to having you as part of the Measurement Marketing Academy soon. With that, we'll go ahead and wrap this one up. This has been Strategy Session, the future of measurement, the tools you'll use in 2022 and beyond. Thanks again for watching this particular workshop, and we'll see you on the next one soon. Take care.